Picture this. It's the late 1940s and the Second World War has just ended. The U.S. has been lifted out of the Great Depression. America is now becoming more and more commercialized and eager for new development. To investors and even the government, Florida looks like the perfect place for development. It has beaches, it's warm, and very undeveloped. There's just two major issues. The Everglades, a muggy swamp with too much water to build anything, and Marjory Stoneman Douglas, a journalist and writer determined on conserving the Everglades. Marjory Stoneman Douglas was born April 7th in 1890 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When she was 6, her parents separated and she lived with her mother as well as her aunts and grandparents. At a young age, Marjory was forced to mature and take on responsibilities as her mother was committed to a mental sanatorium several times, and towards the end of Marjory attending college, her mother discovered a tumor and died shortly after. Early on, Marjory was an avid reader and writer, and in 1915, when she was 25, she reunited with her father in Miami, Florida, as she came to work for him as a writer for his newspaper, the Miami Herald. There she began as a society columnist, but soon joined the Navy. Though she shortly decided that the Navy was not for her and requested a discharge, she then joined the American Red Cross and helped during World War I. When she returned, she wrote about women's suffrage, civil rights, and better sanitation. This led her to become a sort of local celebrity, as many read her work. This led Ernest Coe, a man determined to get the Everglades a certified national park, to recruit her to help save the Everglades. It was around 1930 when Marjory was first enlisted to help the Everglades. She and Coe went along on an exploratory trip to determine the feasibility of the Everglades becoming a national park.
Yeah, well, that was the time, as I told you, when the committee for the establishment of the Everglades Park brought down people from all over the country, including heads of the National Park Service and other people.
On the trip, she fell in love with the ecosystem and made it her mission to help it. She then spent 13 years researching the Everglades and also writing short stories on her own to make money. After some time, she was approached by an editor seeing if she would write a book on the Everglades. So, for the next 5 years, she spent her time writing and researching for the book. Finally, in 1947, when Marjory was 57 years old, her book was published and was a massive success. Through her book about the Everglades, she brought in support from people who weren't previously conservationists, as she showed the general population for the first time that this ecosystem wasn't just a big swamp, but a slow-moving river that is extremely diverse and unique and can't be found anywhere else in the world. That same year her book was published, the Everglades became a national park. But while the park was protected, surrounding areas were not, and a new threat arose. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers were planning on draining the waterways through canals and dams that went into the Everglades, the same waterways that provide water for people in Florida and are vital to the organisms of the Everglades.
What did people think of the Everglades at the time?
Well, they didn't think much of it. They mostly thought there was a lot of fresh water out there, and they wanted to get the water off and sell the land for farms, and that's about all they knew about it.
Yet again, Marjory helps to strike down these plans, but still, the Everglades face another issue. In 1968, a plan to build a huge airport was going to threaten the Everglades, as it was planned to be on the border of the national park. Marjory, yet again, when she was 78 years old, helped to stop the airport to be fully built. To garner opposition to the airport, she started the Friends of the Everglades and made the membership dues only $1 so everyone could join. This resulted in massive pushback against the airport. The government was then forced to shut down the project, leaving only the runway with nothing surrounding it. This momentum also helped to establish the Big Cypress Reserve, which expanded the protected areas of the Everglades. But why Marjory? Why is she such a vital figure in conservation and American history over Theodore Roosevelt or John Muir? Why a random Floridian woman who you've probably never heard of? Well, her words and actions speak to her importance. Throughout her life, she embodied the American spirit of democracy, in that anyone, no matter your standing or background, can have an impact on the nation. And while Theodore Roosevelt started the national parks, he was the president and a very powerful person, while Marjory just got the Everglades a park just as a writer and advocate in Florida. As she once said, "Be a nuisance where it counts. Do your part to inform and stimulate the public to join your action. Be depressed, discouraged, and disappointed at failure and the disheartening effects of ignorance, greed, corruption, and bad politics, but never give up." In fact, Marjory didn't even start fighting for the Everglades till her 40s, but continued on fighting for it for the rest of her life, which she lived to be 108. She was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Bill Clinton. Throughout her life, she rose to challenges put to her and didn't give up. And though she once said, "I'd like to hear less talk about men and women and more talk about citizens," she was the first, if not the first woman, heading the conservation efforts, setting a trend for women to be the faces of the movement, and paving the way for figures like Rachel Carson, who have also used their voices and writings to help the environment.